Okay, so again, thank you for taking the time today to be here. My name's Andrew Neitlich. I'm the founder and director of the Center for Executive Coaching, and today we're going to talk about the top coaching niches that are out there. I want to start by talking about why it's important to have a coaching niche, and then take you through what the most important niches might be. Just briefly, Center for Executive Coaching has been certifying coaches for over a decade now, certifying both individuals who want to get into coaching as well as individuals from organizations including Kaiser Permanente, Baxter Health, AFLAC, the National Basketball Association, Deloitte, Booz Allen, U.S. Air Force, FedEx, Cisco Systems, Microsoft, University of Minnesota, and many others. Quickly, just about me. I have a full coaching practice as well. I'm an author. I've written a few guerrilla marketing books, including Guerrilla Marketing for Coaches, Guerrilla Marketing for a Bulletproof Career. I've written The Way to Coach Executives, Elegant Leadership, and some others. My coaching practice has focused in the past and presently on primarily 6 niches: healthcare, delivery systems, universities, emerging technology companies, professional service firms, nonprofits, and franchises. So that's where I tend to focus my practice. Okay, so let me take you through where we're going to focus today. Here's our agenda. So what we're going to do, first I want to talk about why choose a niche. Then I want to talk about what's called the 70-30 rule, which might give you some comfort as you think about the type of niche you want to focus on, or how to focus on a niche. Next, I want to talk about the requirements for success. There's 3 requirements for success in choosing a niche, and then from there we'll get specifically into how to into the best examples of coaching niches today. The webinar itself will take about 1 hour, okay? And I hope you find great value in it. If you like what you hear, I'm always available afterwards if you'd like to email me and set up some time to talk, or you can always email me any questions as you reflect on what you've learned from today as well, okay? So let's get into it. First of all, let's talk about 3 reasons to choose a niche. I should tell you, when I first started as a coach, my own background was that I left a fairly large consulting firm. I saw a big opportunity to get into coaching. I was tired of traveling around every Monday morning. I'd wake up at about 5 a.m., get on an airplane, and not come back until late Thursday night. Met the woman I loved, who is working in an office right near me. We're both blessed to work from home, which is one of the great things about being in coaching. It's so flexible and wonderful. But I realized as I wanted to start a family that the coaching world, the consulting world was not going to work, and just saw great opportunities in coaching. It was so much more flexible. But anyway, it was not an easy road when I first started out, and one of the reasons was exactly what this webinar is about. I didn't start with a niche. I just went out there as local smart guy, Andrew Neitlich. What's your problem? What can I coach you on? And I was completely unsuccessful. And it wasn't until I figured out the power of having a niche that I started succeeding. And so I figured out these 3 reasons, and I want to share them with you right now. Reason number 1, a shotgun approach to marketing is expensive in a couple of ways, not just in terms of money, but also in terms of how ineffective it is. That is, I had the belief that everybody was a prospective client. That is, I thought I could go to anybody and they would hire me. But it turned out that that was not the case. In fact, if there are 7 billion people on the planet, I thought all of them could be a client, but my conversion rate was virtually 0. In fact, at the beginning it was 0 until someone told me straight out, Andrew, I'm never going to hire you because I don't know who you are. I don't know what you stand for. And so if you go after everybody, it's pretty expensive, right? You're running around like a chicken with your head cut off, essentially. It's a lot of energy as you go from one type of prospect to another. You're trying to be a chameleon, adapting to everybody, and that gets tiring. It's really very difficult. You're trying to appear in different venues, change your marketing message on a dime. It's very tricky to do. You spread yourself too thin, and it becomes quite an expensive approach. What I realized was that at a certain point, and it takes courage to do this, it's a scary thing to do, but by having or choosing to have a smaller target market, by saying, no, not everybody is going to be a client, what happens is I end up having a much smaller universe of prospective clients, but my conversion rate went up dramatically. I was able to be much more successful. I had a much smaller universe of potential clients, but many more clients. And so number one, a shotgun approach is very expensive. The second reason to choose a niche is that you gain credibility by speaking your target market's language. So between you and me, we know that we could likely provide solutions to almost anybody, right? Coaching is a very powerful approach. We can help people gain insights through what we do as coaches. I have no doubt about that. The problem is our clients don't necessarily agree with that. Okay, so for instance, what I found is that if somebody's in healthcare, they want to know that I can somehow help with them, with their needs, that I can speak their language. And I figured that out. I figured out that if I went after people in healthcare, if I spoke their language, I came across as much more credible to them. And that made a big difference. Similarly, when I started focusing my message to nonprofit leaders and executives and speaking the language of nonprofits, I was much more attractive to them. I spoke their language, and I was much more valuable to them than a generalist who didn't understand their world. So even though I know, just as you know, that we can solve the problems of people in almost any industry, people in any function, they don't see it that way. But by focusing, we gain instant credibility because we understand their problems, we speak their language. That's the second reason why having a niche makes a lot of sense. Okay, I hope that makes sense. What you see here in this picture, of course, is the Rosetta Stone. We're translating. Okay, and I found that was what made the difference for me. In fact, the very first thing I did when I figured out after about 3 months of struggling, as a coach who was your neighborhood smart guy who could coach anybody, right? Somebody, I had a networking meeting with somebody. We met for coffee, and again, she said, Andrew, I'm not going to hire you. I can't even refer you to anybody because I don't know what you stand for. That hit me like a ton of bricks, and I decided to focus. And I focused in 2 areas simultaneously, but one of the first places I focused in on was nonprofits, board development, strategic planning for nonprofits, coaching nonprofit executive directors. And I targeted my marketing messages to nonprofits. I created a seminar about strategic planning for nonprofits that was free, that I delivered through a nonprofit support association. As soon as I did that, I got my first 2 clients. And I have no doubt that the reason I did that was because I started speaking the language of nonprofit executives. It made a huge difference. So that's number 2. And so number 3, what happens? You stand out more easily. You stand out as a credible expert to a target market, and that means people see you, they talk about you, they see you as valuable. I know this to be the case. It worked for me. It works for coaches I train. It works for my colleagues. As soon as we take a stand and we reduce the universe to whom we market to, our conversion rate goes up. We become a go-to professional that people seek out to solve problems. And that's why having a niche makes sense, okay, as opposed to being a generalist. Any comments on that before we proceed? Just want to make sure that makes sense. This takes a lot of courage. We live in a time of what's called affluenza, where everybody has so many options, where so many people are dabblers, and it's very difficult to make a choice and to focus on a niche. A niche, by the way, can be an industry, it can be a function, like chief financial officers or chief operating officers, marketing, human resources. It could be a demographic group like millennials, women, etc. It could be a psychographic group like Christian-owned businesses, or I know somebody who focuses on motorcycle riders. That's a strong, a group with strong values. It could be a geographic group. You could be the dominant leadership coach in a particular geographic group, although again, even there I would mix and match with a particular industry. Okay, and it could also be an issue, although again, with an issue, it helps to have a specific industry or function. Okay, so that the tighter you can be, the better. And there are certain criteria with niches. We can get to those as we go. All right? So let me share with you a rule that helped me a lot, right? Some people will say you should put all your eggs in one basket, and I found that this does not help. So what I teach in the Center for Executive Coaching is what's called the 70-30 rule. I want to share this with you. I think it will help take the pressure off. The 70-30 rule means that you spend 70% of your time pursuing, proactively going after a specific niche or maybe two niches, and 30% of the time it's okay to be a generalist. That is, you tap into your network or you see what comes your way. And what this does is take the pressure off, because sometimes things come to you, and if you're open to them, it can create a whole new niche for you. Let me give you an example in my own case. I'll give you a couple. So for instance, I started with some nonprofits and ended up doing, say, a strategic retreat in one case for a theater company, and working very closely with the executive director of a theater company, and it was some wonderful work. At one point, a member, actually the accountant of that theater company, introduced me to a nonprofit association of engineers. And that engineering firm introduced me to a project that the National Science Foundation was doing. The National Science Foundation, for those outside the United States, is a federal government group that gives grants for scientific engagements. And in this case, they had given an $80 million grant to a coalition of universities for a huge earthquake engineering project. Now, I had never done anything like that, but because of my association with this engineering nonprofit, they brought me in as the organizational development consultant and coach to this huge team as part of a $2 million team development group. And that led to my work as a collaboration coach for some universities. And so universities became a niche of mine. I wasn't looking for that, never thought of it, but it became a niche. So that 30% rule, by being open to things, works really well. In the past year, through a colleague of mine who knows about my toolkits and all the work I do through the Center for Executive Coaching, introduced me to one of the major sporting franchises in the United States, right? Basketball, football, one of those. And I'm starting to work with them on some leadership development. Again, if you look at me, I don't have anything that would indicate that I would work with the NFL or the NBA or the National Hockey League or the Major League Baseball here in the United States. But again, by being open to that, this could be a new niche for me. That's that 30%. Okay, so good things will come your way that can become a niche. At the same time, I proactively target various industries or functions. So that I found that to be a really nice approach, right? It takes the pressure off. You don't have to put all your eggs in one basket. You can proactively target a particular niche market while being open to things that come your way, because again, you never know what you're going to attract. The market is always right. It always will tell you where you should be. As another example, I went after the big technology companies in Silicon Valley, and I did okay. I was pretty good at, for instance, going into a big technology company and reaching middle management to coach them. I figured out how to do what was called the $20,000 coaching engagement, right? Because most of the middle managers in a big tech company can sign a $20,000 check. And many coaches, in fact, are pretty good at the $20,000 engagement, but I wasn't really satisfied there. I started speaking in Silicon Valley, but what came to me were technology CEOs with $10 million to $80 million companies, and they were looking for coaching. So without looking for that, the market said, hey, Andrew, there's people who want to work with you who maybe aren't running Sun Microsystems or AOL or Google, but who are running really nice companies, and they're the CEO. And I loved working with them. So again, I didn't think of that initially, but by speaking and doing all the right things, they came to me. Does that make sense? Does this 70-30 rule make sense? It's a really important rule that's helped me a lot. I don't hear anyone else talking about it. So as you think about a niche, I want you to think about, be proactive with 70% of your time. Go after specific niches. Some of you in the questions box have noted some very nice niches. But be open. Allow 30% to be open to what might come to you. Does that make sense? Is that helpful? I hope so. Good, thanks. Some of you saying yes. Good, thank you. Let's keep going. So it's not enough just to declare a niche. There's 3 requirements for success that I want to take you through, and then we'll move into some examples of specifically 25 coaching niches that I'm seeing. I mean, there's many more, but I want to take you through that. Oh, good one. One of you saying women leaders in technology. I love that because it combines 2 aspects of a niche, right? A demographic group, women leaders, and we know that's a big issue. Recently, we're seeing in the United States, at least, right, 30% of leaders in technology are women, and that's becoming a huge issue. And it's a industry sector, technology. So I like that quite a bit. One of you is mentioning, sure, church leaders is very good. In fact, we have some members of the Center for Executive Coaching targeting that. The issue there is finding those who have funding, right? A big criteria of a niche, there are 2 criteria, right? One is, do they have funding? And 2 is, are they willing to pay? So a lot of people go into healthcare. We'll talk about that. Physicians, attorneys, for instance, have money, but sometimes they're so arrogant, they're not willing to spend money. And so those are 2 criteria, right? While we're on it, we might as well talk about what are the criteria of a good niche, right? Criteria of a good niche are, number 1, you can reach them, right? Remember, we don't want a shotgun approach to a niche. There's no point in having a niche if you can't reach the people in the niche, if they're fragmented, if they're all over the place. So for instance, a turnaround, if you're a turnaround coach, what good is that if you can't figure out how to reach people when they're ready for a turnaround? Usually people in turnaround situations are too late. So we want to make sure there's magazines, websites, associations, so you can reach them. If you can't reach them, what's the point? Number 2, they need to have a problem that you can identify where they're willing to spend money. Number 3, they have to have money. If they're broke, what's the point? So there's a lot of business coaches out there who are struggling. Why? Because they're going after entrepreneurs and tiny little businesses with no money. What's the point? Number 3, I think it helps if you have a story you can tell so that you have credibility in that niche. Number 4, I don't think you want to be the trailblazer. I think you want to see that there's some competition there already, and then you can be the best there, but let others blaze the trail for you, right? Let others do the research for you, right? A lot of fast food companies look to see if there's a McDonald's in the market because McDonald's is so good at market research, they can piggyback off McDonald's rather than being the first. All right? Next, there's this question of how big does the niche have to be? The answer is you have to do the math to make sure that it's big enough to sustain you with a reasonable conversion rate, right? A lot of you are asking questions in the question box, is this too broad or too specific? Only you can answer that by doing some math. So for instance, I do a lot of work with healthcare delivery systems in the United States. There's about 5,000 of them. Now that might seem really small, but it's not, right? With 5,000 healthcare delivery systems, if I can just work with a few of them a year, right? Typically there's, thousands of employees, but, one executive team for a healthcare delivery system can keep me very busy. And if I can work with 5 to 10 of them a year on a retainer for $10,000 to $20,000 a month, that's not bad, right? So I know that if I'm working with, say, 5 to 10 healthcare delivery systems out of 5,000 a year, I'm doing quite well. So it doesn't have to be a huge market. And within healthcare delivery systems, I know there's academic medical systems, there's community hospitals, there's tertiary care centers, right? There's a lot of ways to cut it. All right, so we'll go through some of these in a minute. And again, you can email me after if you'd like me to get into detail about your specific idea. Let's get into the 3 requirements of success. 1, you can't get into a niche without a compelling marketing message. In the Center for Executive Coaching, one of the things that sets our program apart, with all respect to other programs, is that we go into great detail. I will personally review your marketing message. I'll even, in some cases, I'll edit it for our members. Coaching marketing messages are, by and large, god-awful. They're generic. They fail a number of basic copywriting tests. If you go on any coach website, you will see some horrible marketing messages. If you don't have a marketing message that is about your prospect, if you don't have a marketing message that talks about their problems before it talks about you and why you're so great, if you don't use the word you 3 times more than you use the word I, that is talking about yourself, you probably have a pretty generic, lousy marketing message. So you need a compelling marketing message that speaks their language and talks about business problems they care about. If instead you're talking about leadership, if you're talking about emotional intelligence, if you're talking about fuzzy stuff that coaches care about, you're probably not going to get hired even if you have a target market. All right, so number 1, you need a compelling marketing message. Number 2, you need to get out there and get visible in low-cost, high-impact ways. And you'll see here a grid. There's only 4 ways to get visible, and here's the chart of them. The R stands for referrals. You need to be very, very good at referral conversations. And again, in the Center for Executive Coaching, we spend a lot of time practicing these and discussing these. We have a whole track starting soon about marketing. And there's a specific way to have referral conversations. I'm not talking about word of mouth where you just say, hey, if you think of somebody with a need, come to me. Number 2, EM stands for educational marketing. Gone are the days where you can just push yourself onto clients and say, hire me, or you do mailings and you do all things like that. No. What you need to do is establish yourself as someone who educates clients about their most pressing problems. You educate them. You come across as an expert talking about the problems they face and solutions to those problems. So you can speak, you can write, you can blog, you can do videos. You do webinars. There are so many ways to educate prospects. That's called educational marketing. It's the most effective way to show people that you're an expert, to compel them to come to you to learn more. The L is leadership. You should position yourself with at least one activity that shows that you're a leader, whether it's being on the board of a nonprofit where prospects show up, whether it's being on the board and a leader in an association in your industry or functional area, whatever it is. And finally, OL is online, which is not as scary as people make it out to. That just means a good LinkedIn presence, being active on LinkedIn, not just collecting names and contacts, which it boggles my mind, but it's what most people do. Being active on forums and not just posting insipid discussion topics, which most are. What's the difference between a manager and a leader? If I see that one more time on LinkedIn, I don't know what I'm going to do. There's just not very deep discussions there. But really getting engaged in meaningful discussions with your target market that set you apart as somebody who has substance, and connecting with people in a meaningful way. So that's all. That's all you have to do. It doesn't cost a lot. It takes time. It takes substance. It takes caring about people. It takes bringing the online aspect of our lives today into phone calls and connecting and helping people, caring about people. And no one does it very well anymore. But you have a huge opportunity to do it. That's number 2. And number 3 is what I see missing the most from coaches. It's substance, having toolkits and frameworks that really solve problems. Coaching is evolving. The people who started groups like the International Coach Federation came from a life coaching background. And what you're seeing in the industry today is a transition where more and more people are coming from consulting backgrounds, organizational development backgrounds. You're seeing more people who understand business, organizations, true leadership coming into the field, and they have substance. They have toolkits. They have frameworks. Let me give you an example. Usually at this point in my webinars, I'll show you like the Center for Executive Coaching toolkits to give you examples, things like our toolkits on influence, strategic planning, engaging and mobilizing employees, I've been recently interviewing our members to see how they've evolved since joining. I'm just going to let one of our members talk for me, and then I'll get into the top 25 coaching niches, if you don't mind. Let me just, this is a woman named Kelly Black, wonderful coach. When she started, she was just growing her practice. I'm going to let her talk for what I'm talking about, the types of tools required to succeed, and then we'll get into the top 25 toolkits. So, what she says is she has a comprehensive toolbox to help her clients address really pressing problems. Instead of being positioned as a one-off coach, she's viewed by her clients as having a cohesive set of solutions to support them across their business. And for her, she's running into a much more elite circle of clients than ever before. And she's not kidding. She's working with folks out of MIT, private equity folks. So for instance, she has one client that was a one-year contract. It's been re-upped now to a 3-year contract and given her over $150,000. So she's working in the room with serious business people who are smart, seasoned, run in top circles. She's now applying for a project that has her presenting to a billionaire who's well known in his board of directors. I could not have done this without the Center for Executive Coaching. And then she goes on to say this: everyone says they are a coach right now, but many coaches are not talking about anything. Many of the business people I know now would not talk to most of them. They would leave the room if they heard most coaches talk the way they talk. This program gets me in the room with top decision makers because of the substance. The CEC just put my practice in a completely different orbit. It's really primed me to run in executive level circles and have them say to me, "You have helped me think better, and you have helped me accomplish things I didn't think I could accomplish. It has taken my business to what feels like the stratosphere." So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about tools. You need substance as a coach now. You can't just sit around asking open-ended, powerful, what's called powerful questions anymore. The market has evolved, and executives will not tolerate the type of coaching that so many people are unfortunately doing. Okay, so that's what's required when you go into a niche. I just want to make that clear. So if at the end of this webinar you're interested in talking more about the Center for Executive Coaching, if you're a seasoned coach, we have just the toolkits. If you're thinking of getting certified, we have the whole certification program. And if you want to get the ICF designation, we can talk about that. Okay, so with that, let's move into some top coaching niches today. There's 25 of them I'm going to talk about today. There's actually many more, but these are the ones I'm seeing. And as we go, feel free to ask questions. The first one I'm going to bring up is healthcare delivery, only because it's one that I've been involved in. Many of our members are. And I could talk for an hour just about this, right? Those of you in the United States know that healthcare is in deep transition right now. At the same time, you have a number of people in healthcare who are trained clinically and technically, but lack skills in teamwork, leadership, relating to people, engaging and mobilizing employees. And so there's an enormous opportunity for you as a coach to get in there and solve so many problems. Everything from helping clinical people transition into leadership roles, helping people with leadership presence, helping resolve conflict, helping with change, leadership, and management, helping people even just understand different styles, helping with communication. I can go on and on and on. There is so much in healthcare and healthcare systems. It's so complex. There's so much at stake. There is no limit to the ways that a good coach can help. And you can go beyond coaching to training, helping to set up leadership academies. And again, even just being a translator or helping different units translate, helping IT translate or talk to clinical teams, helping the business units translate among clinical and IT and the board, educating the board about different aspects of healthcare, helping to integrate mergers because there's mergers from different cultures. It just goes on and on. Healthcare is a huge opportunity. Any comments there? Anyone disagree? And I believe this is the case all over the world because healthcare is just so complicated. Next up, agree 100%. Thank you, Jennifer. Next up is related to healthcare, but it's different enough and big enough One of you says, what about ability to pay in healthcare? I mean, healthcare organizations are billion-dollar companies. They absolutely have budget for this, and they're making budgets for this because they, so I mean, this is where I got my start. A diagnostic that I would do in healthcare was anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000, and the projects I worked on were $2 million. Next up is physicians. And now physicians, of course, is within the domain of healthcare, but it's a specialized enough field that I think it's worthy of its own topic. There are another number of physicians out there who have all sorts of issues. And among the issues are, one, they're not happy in their current career, so there's career transition coaching that's available. Number two, within their own practices, there's a lot of dysfunction, and so helping physicians navigate within their own practices is an opportunity. But where I see a lot of work is physicians within healthcare systems. They often, despite years and years of training and the fact that they think sometimes that they know all there is to know, physicians often have very limited skills when it comes to working on teams, working within organizations, or even having the patience to do that. Patience here not meaning healthcare patients, but that tolerance for others. And so there's a whole category of coaching about disruptive physicians that is emerging. Behavioral coaching, using the tools of emotional intelligence. In some cases, we have a member of the Center for Executive Coaching who works with physicians who are about to lose their privileges because they're so abusive in the operating room, the surgical suites, that they'll lose their privileges because they're putting the hospital at risk for being a hostile workplace, that the hospital won't tolerate them, which is new. 10 years ago, hospitals would tolerate these people because they brought in so much revenue. Now they will not. Okay? Yeah, so as one of you says, the practice management industry is worse than the hospital industry. You have here small business owners who do not have business training and only look at the bottom line. So there's, another piece of it. So you have two niches here, very closely related, but again, I would separate out physicians. This is a group that's hurting. They've been trained forever, and they don't know how to fix these issues. They have huge blind spots. Okay? They need us, as one of you is saying. Yeah, I work with them. They need us. Yep, well said. Let's move on. Another area, nonprofits. Now, there is a myth that nonprofits don't have money. This was my first niche, and I was amazed at the amount of money that's available. In fact, I worked with a $1 billion foundation. I worked with the American Red Cross, and I worked with small nonprofits that had, believe it or not, very little trouble either going to wealthy members of their board or foundations that were trying to build capacity. And in some ways, it was easier getting money from them than it was from many large organizations. So here are the issues with nonprofits. One, if you have a board of directors of a nonprofit, and let's say there are 18 members of the board, you will have 36 opinions about which way the organization should go. So there's huge opportunity to coach and even facilitate about strategic planning. There's huge opportunity to coach the executive director about how to wrangle the board. Often you have a non-professional board that needs upgrading and a lot of work about selecting and choosing the right board members, both about diversity but also about the right types of board members to take the organization to the next level. You often have executive directors who are burning out and don't want to do it anymore. Like physicians, you have executive directors in this case who are very passionate about the mission but often don't have any training about leading an organization, and so they can use your coaching. You also often have grants to build capacity in organizations where you can be there. One of you saying, so true, my second source of revenue is a nonprofit, coaching executive directors. Great. And you also often have staff that is hungry for development and isn't getting it from the executive director. So you can work with the executive director to help them better engage and mobilize teams. And again, that's one of the best toolkits that the Center for Executive Coaching offers if you're interested in our program. So nonprofits can benefit from, they have the mission, they have the vision, but often they don't have that management toughness that they need I'm a pretty no-nonsense guy. And people would hire me because one of the things I had was the ability to tell the truth. And I was surprised by that because, I'm not the type of person that would work well in a nonprofit, but they liked me because I could say things and ask questions that maybe they didn't want to ask. And so, if you're someone like that, that can be great. Or if you're diplomatic and maybe focus more on relationships versus results, you can also fit in very nicely because you'll fit with the culture. So again, nonprofits, very, very nice niche out there for coaching. Give it some thought. Now, within nonprofits, there's tons of niches there, right? There's human services. There's arts organizations. There's schools. We have a number of people in the Center for Executive Coaching going after principals of secondary education, going after private schools. Again, organizations that need help. Okay, here's someone saying, I make major money in nonprofits. I do several programs on leadership, counseling work for the people who they help. Great. Makes a lot of sense. You can also create a number of tools for nonprofits, seminars. Again, you can see the possibilities here, right? As opposed to being a generalist, why not focus in? My favorite website of all time is fundraisingcoach.com, somebody who focuses exclusively on fundraising for nonprofits and coaching even within that on the face-to-face ask. Let's keep going. I hope you're finding this valuable. Let's see, universities. Again, I ended up here by chance on that 30%. But my goodness, universities are a classic case of a place where people do all sorts of things. We recently had a seminar, Center for Executive Coaching certification seminar, and one of the members, my goodness, she's a genius. She's a former attorney, and she's now about to coach a major university on a strategic plan for a learning center that they have. And it just was wonderful to hear about her and her plans to help this one learning center in the university because the learning center has no direction. And it's like the employees there are just, I guess she used the metaphor of airplanes passing, in different directions. And she can help bring them together as a team by coaching the faculty head of this learning center, potentially bringing one vision, one direction. It's something they don't know how to do. Everyone moves in their own way. In my own case, I worked a lot on collaboration. Grants now are coming to teams in universities. And as you may know, professors didn't exactly get tenure by working together with others. They did their own research. So there's a lot of opportunities here to help universities think that way. We also know that a lot of private universities are struggling now because they have to be more accountable to students. So there's a lot of opportunities to help universities who, again, don't necessarily have skills in management and leadership start thinking a little bit more collaboratively and a little bit bigger. Okay, yeah, so one of you saying higher education and primary education have not invested in their people historically, but they're seeing the need now, precisely. So I'm seeing more interest among universities in this area of coaching. Next, internal information technology. We know from the past, you've seen the statistics, right, that some huge percentage of IT projects are over budget and do not achieve the required results. We also know that there's a trend towards agile development of technology projects. And yet, I still hear from members of the Center for Executive Coaching who have a technology background that it's a mess out there, that internal IT organizations struggle to get projects done. There's now a struggle amongst different generations within organizations because you have baby boomers struggling with with certain, with apps and with social media. You have millennials who really understand the new technology. So there's, legacy technologies. I mean, there's so many issues helping to coach internal IT, but also, how to translate business results, how to communicate effectively, how to have leadership presence, and how to make the case and connect to the organization's strategy while getting things done. So internal IT is great. And we know that IT in general, which I'll get to, is a very nice opportunity, right? Because again, a lot of IT personnel have fantastic technical skills, but may lack communication skills, leadership presence, what we might call emotional intelligence, although I don't love using that term. All the things that coaches really can bring to the table to help them broaden their toolkits and be more flexible as leaders and communicators and influencers. So that's another area that I'm seeing a lot of growth in. And organizations recognize the need to invest in this. Does that make sense? Internal IT. I'm going to keep going if you don't mind. And again, think of this as an assembly line, perhaps to help you focus in. Regardless, you can't do any of this. You can't just hang up a shingle and say, I coach internal IT. Again, you need the marketing message, you need the marketing plan to get visible, and you still need the substance and the toolkits to show that you are a credible professional. That's how the market is evolving. Next up, technology growth companies. Again, I've had some success here. Typically, this is how it works for me. I'll give a speech about, say, engage and mobilize employees. I might give a speech somewhere at an association about communicating or influence, some sort of soft skill. Or I might give it on strategy. And a technology CEO will come up to me. Let's say it's about engage and mobilize employees. Technology CEO comes up to me and says, loved your talk. This is something I know nothing about. Can you help me? Or the technology CEO will say, we're reaching a point in our company where we've grown fine, sort of organically, and now we're mature, and I need your help. I need you to help us put in systems, or I need you to coach me or coach our team on putting in systems so that we can get a little bit more organized. Those are the types of things that come about. Or we need capacity. We're growing so quickly that we're out of control now. I need you to help us take a breath and think about 6 months or a year down the pipe. What kinds of talent do we need? How do we develop leaders? How do we start putting a culture in place? There are so many opportunities for these technology growth companies to think about the human side of growth, and so many of the leaders there are difficult to work with. They have blind spots, just like some of the disruptive physicians. They don't know how to deal with this stuff, and someone like you can come in and just save the day. Okay, one of you saying, do you need to have industry experience to select an industry as a niche? Great question. Let me give you an example. One of the most successful coaches I know in Silicon Valley is a woman probably in her early 60s now. She has no technology experience. And technology CEOs come to her, and she will specifically say, look, I don't do content. I don't know anything about technology. All I do is context. All I know is who you are as a leader. I know how you relate to people. And they love her. In fact, they love the fact that she doesn't know technology. You see, you have to turn any weakness you have into a strength. So technology growth companies is a very nice niche. I love it. I've been, and again, I have some technology background. I've worked for some technology companies. At this point, I can say that I have some. But again, I like that. I like answering that, I'm all about who you are as a leader. That's what's important. And they appreciate that because they can find technology people anywhere. Same thing if you don't have an MBA. I'll say, look, you can find MBAs anywhere. Harvard Business School graduates 900 MBAs every year. You can find them anywhere. Combine that with the top 10 business schools, that's 9,000 MBAs a year. They're everywhere. But where are you going to find someone who understands the psychology of leadership, who understands how to relate to people, how to have leadership presence? That's a much harder thing to find. That's where I bring a fresh perspective. Through the questions I ask, through the toolkits I bring, the substance I have to help you look at the unknown, look at the space between all those analyses that the MBAs are doing. I help you make things happen once you know the answer. That's pretty powerful. Let's keep going. Again, keep asking any questions specific to niches. Again, clinical, scientific, and technical experts. Now let's just get specific to the type of people that we're talking about. These are people, to coin, the way that IBM looks at some people they recruit. They think of the letter T. The vertical part of the letter T represents the technical expertise of clinical, scientific, and technical folks, right? Very technical. What they also look for is that horizontal part of the T, that ability to communicate, that breadth, not just the depth. And unfortunately, many technical, clinical, and scientific people lack that breadth That's where a coach comes in handy. We can help people be more influential. We can help them take their knowledge and communicate it in a way that they make their ideas happen. We can help them work effectively on teams. We can help them build their power base in an organization so they can make things happen. It's not enough to have an off-the-chart IQ. We know that from Gladwell's book, Outliers, where he gave the example of someone with one of the highest IQs in the world who basically lived in his parents' basement, couldn't get anything done. Right? As coaches, we can help people develop the skills to take their genius, to take their depth of technical expertise and turn it into business results, into effectiveness, into impact. That is an absolutely huge area for you as a coach, to help people stretch and develop flexibility, to turn brilliant people into leaders. Okay, very big opportunity. I like this niche a lot, right? The whole world is turning into knowledge, clinical, scientific, technical, and a lot of these people just have not developed these skills. Something like a coach, meeting just weekly with somebody to help improve simple behaviors that many people take for granted, can be invaluable, can change a person's life, can change their career, especially if you have the toolkit to make it happen. All right, next up, family businesses. 2/3 of the businesses in the United States and around the world are family businesses, and yet there's very little resources devoted to these folks. Family businesses face all sorts of problems. Problems about conflicts. Who do we hire? Who do we fire? How do you fire someone where there's blood? What do you do if a brother-in-law is not performing? How do you pass the business on? How do you create a succession plan? What do you do when there's a divorce? What do you do when people aren't getting along because of family baggage? What do you do? How do you create a succession plan when perhaps one of the children doesn't want to take over the business? So, and how do you help the founder of the business deal with issues that somebody who's not in a family business doesn't have? Issues of guilt, issues of pride, issues of giving up this business that he or she has created. Family business has all sorts of complexity that other businesses don't, and while there are increasingly centers and resources devoted to family businesses, it's still an underserved area. And again, if you can even get tighter on this, like family businesses in a particular sector, I think you can do very well here. And especially as we have more and more baby boomers who have to hand their businesses over, this is a very lucrative potential area. Okay? So I like this one. Next up, banking, good sector. Here in the United States, we have a lot of small banks, community banks, credit unions that are either going to get bought or they're going to die, or they're going to get bigger by buying. We have a lot of these centers. We have a couple of members in the Center for Executive Coaching who are focused here. They're doing a lot of merger activity, merging two cultures. And it takes a lot of leadership to grow quickly as you merge and acquire new banks. At the same time, at the upper echelons of banks, the big mega banks like Bank of America, Chase, we see huge issues as government gets more involved, as we see big fines, as we see customers not putting up with the type of garbage that some of these companies have been in the past doing in terms of customer service. And we see them sometimes seeing the light and having to change. So we see a lot of opportunities potentially in banking, the whole sector of financial services. I'm not saying it's as dynamic and in flux like healthcare is, but in certain pockets there's a lot going on in the banking sectors. Okay, so you might give some thought to that, particularly if you have background in banking. There's some possibilities here. And there's been a lot of flux after the financial crisis where there's some change and some possibilities here. This could mean financial services, investments. There's definitely some things in flux here. Professional services, for me, has been a very nice area. And there's a number of places you can play here. First of all, law firms, consulting firms, accounting firms, always a mess. right? Has anyone worked with any of these? At the partnership level, there's lots of disagreement, animosity, a lot of issues with the direction of the firm. So a lot of opportunities for you to help with clarity about strategic planning, clarity about vision, clarity about the culture. At the same time, there's a lot of opportunity to help the firm with growth. There's a lot of people who want to move up and become partners, but they can't because they're afraid of business development. They're afraid of getting new clients. They don't know how to do it, just like perhaps you were when you first started out as a coach, or you are now if you're thinking of getting into coaching. And so there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to be the coach to up-and-coming professionals to help them become rainmakers. I've done a lot of this work. It's really rewarding work to help someone become independent and rise up through the ranks of partners. Okay, so within professional services, there's a couple of opportunities. Working at the top to help them get clear on the culture, start getting along, resolve conflicts, get clear on strategic planning and the future of the firm, but also work to help future leaders make it through to the partnership level, particularly by becoming comfortable with business development. The other area with professional services firms like engineering and consulting is working with the project leaders to help them become better at engaging their teams, leading teams. There's a lot of team members who are unhappy. There's high turnover in these fields. And a lot of that is due to their managers not knowing how to manage. And so you can be the coach to these folks, helping them understand what it really takes to engage teams. Okay, so professional services can be a very lucrative area. Also, they understand professional services. They understand coaching. And so they're often open to this. Does that make sense? Good. Thank you. All right, let's keep going. One niche that is interesting for some of you perhaps is overseas expansion and expatriate work. So if you happen to have some international background, I'm seeing people who are making a good practice out of either helping expatriates assimilate into your country or culture. I'm seeing others who are helping companies expand and assimilate into a particular culture. Now, what's interesting here, for those in the United States, it used to be that we were the ones expanding. Now I'm seeing a lot of folks in the United States help, for instance, Chinese companies expand here and understand our unique culture. I've had a couple of members of the Center for Executive Coaching who are working with Chinese companies to help them understand our culture. So that's an interesting change of affairs. Don't know what it means necessarily, but there's dynamics. I've done some work in South Africa where there's a lot of opportunity there for a number of multinationals to help expatriates understand the very unique South African culture, workforce, and laws. And so there's some assimilation coaching that I'm seeing. Again, I hope this is useful, but cultural understanding, the rules, the protocols, the etiquette of different countries can be some very interesting coaching. Next up, sales managers. Now here I'm not talking about sales training. What happens with sales managers is something that happens a lot in a number of industries. In fact, back to healthcare, a lot of nurses get promoted to nurse management and they know nothing about management. Similarly, a lot of salespeople get promoted to sales management and they've never been a manager. And so there's an opportunity to work with people like this to help them be better managers. So even if you're not a sales trainer, we're not talking about that. We're talking about how do you engage and mobilize a team if you've never been a manager before. And the reason I think sales managers is one of the best niches here is because there's an easy return on investment, right? Because you're increasing sales. So if you can help a sales manager improve performance in their department, you can measure that. You can say, look, sales was here and now it's here. You have an easy case study to make you a hero and to put on your website and to market. Great. Yeah, one of you says, I've been in both industries and the lack of leadership training is a huge gap. I mean, this is like, I don't know if you know baseball, but you know, when Ted Williams, he was one of the best hitters of all time, but then when he became a coach, he was one of the worst coaches of all time because he couldn't translate his excellence to other players. Right. Yeah. So one of you saying very true in business process outsourcing, the team leader positions are full of young people who do not know how to lead people, just like a sales manager. Yeah, so I suppose we could say the real niche here is finding those industries where they're promoting people who really don't have any leadership experience. They're being promoted on the wrong criteria, perhaps. Very interesting. Thanks. Let's keep going. Intergenerational issues. We now have 4 generations in the workforce. And so there's a lot of coaching opportunities here. How do millennials get along with baby boomers, Generation X, etc. Okay? So we know, you've read the literature, just helping people navigate different issues from different generations. Now, for me, where I've seen people get traction on this is in regards, for instance, to technology. Helping baby boomers understand the latest technology is a nice opening here. So keep in mind that there's some opportunities here. Okay? Next up, I've recently been doing some work in franchises. Franchises is a great opportunity for coaching. If you have a franchise, let's just say you're working with somebody who has 10 units of a franchise or the franchise headquarters, there's variations amongst units. So you could go in and ask the franchise, well, let's look at the variation. Why does this variation exist? And then you could start coaching people who aren't performing and even coach them on, well, how are you going to find out what the people who are performing are doing? What a great place to have nowhere to hide coaching, where people are accountable because you can measure the variation in performance. Franchises are like a laboratory where once you remove the excuses like, well, this location's no good, what's the difference? Well, it's leadership. One of the great things about hospitals is that too, right? If you take 4 different nurse leaders, all leading units with the same types of patients, well, the only difference is leadership. The same is true in franchises. So you can augment the franchise headquarters and help coach multi-unit franchises, whether it's the owner of a region or territory or working with headquarters. I've been having some good success working with a colleague with some franchises lately. So I think that's nice. Okay, next, growth companies reaching maturity. Especially with the recent boom again in Silicon Valley, which whether it's coming to an end or not, it seems to be a cyclical thing. You see a lot of what we saw during the excesses of the dot-com era. This comes and goes. But you have, once again, some well-funded startups that reach maturity at a certain point, and they need people like you to come in and help them reach that next phase. And sometimes that means coaching young leaders to think differently about the company, to put in some capacity, to think about their needs for systems and processes, to think about new types of people to lead the company into the future. So that's a very nice opportunity. Again, a number of coaches in the Center for Executive Coaching seem to be doing some very nice work with fast growth companies that have reached an inflection point where they need to be thinking about maturity. So again, if one could imagine that it's not hard to give some talks in this area and position yourself as someone with a clear solution about what it takes to do this. Okay, and again, we have some toolkits that help you do this. High potential employees. Again, if you were to join the Center for Executive Coaching, we have an entire toolkit where you could create a leadership academy and a coaching academy for high potential employees. It's right there for you. But this is a very nice opportunity, right? A lot of companies are looking for succession plans and they want a turnkey solution to coach high potential employees to the next level. This might be a combination of group coaching, training, leadership academies. You can create all of these and be that outsourced provider of development for high potential employees. Very, very nice opportunity. Strategic planning, always a favorite. What's nifty here is that companies no longer necessarily want to hire McKinsey or similar companies for $2 million a pop. I've seen a very nice market in the small to mid-sized companies where for $50,000 or $60,000 a coaching and facilitation model works very nicely for strategic planning. In fact, the Center for Executive Coaching has a toolkit that you get that shows you how to coach people and how to run facilitated sessions on strategic planning. Very, very powerful. Exit and succession planning. Again, millions of baby boomers retiring, 10,000 people retiring every day. They cannot sell their businesses. 85% of businesses listed for sale do not sell. Why? Because they haven't set their business up right to sell. You can help. Again, we have a toolkit called Succession Planning, and it's right there for you to coach business leaders and owners on how to put a succession plan together so they can actually sell their business, cash out, turn it over to the next generation, whatever they want to do, and it's invaluable to them. They need to do that. This is a very nice market. In fact, you see some firms sprouting out that do nothing but this for businesses now. And you can team up with accountants, estate planners. It's a very interesting and growing opportunity. Next up, performance improvement. Here, I would suggest that you would focus in on a particular industry or type of business, but performance improvement is a perennial favorite. Again, used to be in the realm of consulting, but people, as they see the power of coaching, realize that the coaching model is a less invasive, more cost-effective way to get a return on investment and capitalize on the internal knowledge of the company or organization. Coaching is a really nice way to do performance improvement. And again, we have the toolkits ready to go for you. But it's a nice niche these days, performance improvement. How can we improve performance? What are the key habits and disciplines? How do we do the change leadership related to performance? How do we set the right goals? And how do we make sure it's not just another fad, but something where the leaders are going first, showing the way, communicating effectively, and making this something that has substance instead of the way that most companies do performance improvement. Okay, so again, in these lean times, these volatile times, performance improvement is always a really effective thing. And what's nice about this is it takes the fluff out of coaching, right? Instead of talking about culture change, which is a good one, we'll get to that one. But if we talk about performance improvement coaching, now we've taken the fluff that many people see in coaching and turned it into something real. So that's a good one. Executing and implementing effectively is another one. That seems to be on the bestseller list these days. You see a lot of books about, the 4 disciplines of execution. And so it turns out there's a lot of companies that can't get anything done. They do a strategic plan and it sits on the shelf or it gets messed up. They can't get things done. And so a lot of coaches have made a nice income becoming the execution coach, the implementation coach, right? If you can't beat McKinsey and do their strategy, well, why not follow up and say, well, I'll help you implement. Or if you can't be the change management consultant, come in after and say, I'll help you implement. I've worked with some clients on execution. In fact, we have a very nice toolkit. I've just revised it, and I'm doing a webinar on that with the Center for Executive Coaching and the Coach Master Toolkit this month on execution. It's a very nice toolkit about what gets in the way of execution for companies. How can we coach leaders at all levels to be better at executing, both for themselves and for the company? And companies really like that. They're frustrated with the inability to get things done. And again, this works really well if you tie it to execution in healthcare, execution in technology, execution in finance, or execution for the IT leader, right? It's nice if you tie these solutions that are horizontal to a particular niche. Okay? Good. All right, let's keep going. And again, if you have some of these questions that I see here are very, very good. I appreciate them. We're not going to have time to answer them. So again, if you're interested in talking more, I'd love to schedule time with you. Just shoot me an email. I'll have my email up at the end. High performance teams and collaboration. One of my best projects ever, as I shared with you at the beginning of this webinar, was focused here. This was that National Science Foundation with the 11 universities, all who had to collaborate, right? Teams never goes out of style. Companies are constantly starting up teams that have conflicts, where there's no trust, there's not a clear goal, where they think they have the wrong people, where the teams get derailed, where priorities change. And having a coach who's objective, who doesn't have a agenda, can be a very valuable way to make sure that the team comes into play. So when I do this work, typically I come in, once a month. I do interviews with team members in between. I coach team members. I take certain team members aside and coach them a little more intensively and help integrate the team. And I tell the truth about what's working and what's not. And, once a month, once a quarter, depending on the team, we come together and we talk about how the team is doing, and it makes a tremendous difference to the effectiveness of the team. Very valuable type of coaching. Very nice niche. Some healthcare companies I work with, they'll have a coach that they look to just for teamwork. They look for coaches who solve specific issues. Okay? Here's a really big one, overwhelm and time management. Kelly Black, that I referenced before, she's an expert in overwhelm. A lot of executives are overwhelmed. Part of that is time management, part is limiting beliefs, perceptions, part is their ability to influence, part is their leadership presence. Again, we have toolkits for all of these, but put together, it's a very nice package to address this idea of overwhelm. When you build enough trust with a client, they'll often share with you, look, I'm overwhelmed. I mean, it's so chaotic, it's so complex. I just feel overwhelmed. Can you help me? And this is one of the most valuable types of coaching you can do. You can have clients say to you, look, you got my marriage back for me. You got my family back. And that's priceless. So helping executives get their life back, set boundaries appropriately, do the things that they should do as a CEO instead of doing things that others can do for them. Yeah, learning to delegate, as one of you is saying. Not going to so many meetings, not fighting fires all the time, not letting others come into their office and dump problems on their lap, getting rid of clutter, but just, setting boundaries, overcoming limiting beliefs about perfection, need to control, trust. All of these things can change people's lives. And that is a huge niche. And again, if you can tie it to a specific industry or function that is facing overwhelm, you could be the go-to professional in a particular niche. You could be on the speaking circuit. You could be asked to be writing books and articles. It could be a wonderful thing. All right, a few more. One of the biggest ones is engage and mobilize, particularly engage and mobilize people. Okay, we know that this is a multi-billion-dollar problem in organizations. Every year, surveys is done by Gallup about how well employees are engaged, and the results are dismal throughout the world. Some tiny percentage of people really feel engaged and productive in their job, and in fact, many feel actively disengaged. And so if we can help managers and leaders do a better job engaging their teams, we can make a huge difference in organizations. Yes, so yes, I do have a toolkit for overwhelm and time management to your question, as well as engage and mobilize. It's one of the most popular ones that people use because it's one of the most common, engage and mobilize. I got my first client, actually my second client off engage and mobilize employees. My first came from strategic planning for, which was applied to nonprofits. And so this engage and mobilize can apply to, technology leaders. It applies to nonprofits, healthcare leaders. Almost anywhere I go, this one comes up. It's a very nice toolkit because it looks at engagement from the point of view of how well do you know your employees, what motivates them, what drives them. Have you earned the right to lead your employees? What would they say? And of course, we incorporate a 360-degree verbal assessment with that. And really get into understanding each employee. How well do you set expectations with them? How well do you talk to them about how they're doing and what you need from them? It's phenomenal. It's so simple and so powerful. Okay, next, culture change. This is high-end stuff. This could be a $250,000 coaching engagement per client. You see here a chocolate fountain because this is the metaphor we use in this, right? The CEO is at the top. The chocolate is coming out of the top. We want the CEO making sure that the chocolate up, down, and across this chocolate fountain is pure, 100% lovely, delicious chocolate. Unfortunately, in many organizations, what happens is you get something that looks like chocolate, but doesn't smell or taste like chocolate. It's the job of the coach to work up and down and across the organization with the CEO to make sure that the chocolate stays delicious, pure, lovely chocolate. This is a phenomenal toolkit. If you end up landing an engagement like this or focusing here, I mean, this is high-end, sophisticated coaching, but what's great about it is the way we teach it, or the way you can do it, is it really ends up just being coaching one person at a time, starting at the top of the organization and working on down. Just one more, and then we'll wrap up. Influence and leadership communication. You know, is it Maxwell that says that leadership and influence are virtually the same, right? You could do a whole set of toolkits or a whole approach, a whole niche based on being the influence coach. That includes power base, communicating with impact, influence conversations, understanding the politics and dynamics of the organization, and coaching your clients on those issues. It will include change leadership, managing up, managing across, collaborating. We have a whole set of toolkits on each of these, if you're interested in a coaching program, or hopefully you have them yourself. But this is an incredible niche and one that easily spreads across different industries. There are many other niches. I've given you 25. We've talked about some others as well, but hopefully this whets your appetite. Hopefully this presentation talks about why it's important to have a niche, what you need to have one, again, a compelling marketing message, a plan to get visible, and some really substantive solutions so that you don't look like a generic coach, which will cause most people, quite honestly, to not necessarily have the respect that you want and deserve. So if you're interested in talking more, please let me know. We have a seminar coming up in person in November 6th through 9th in Sarasota. We have our distance learning program. If you're a seasoned coach, you might just want our toolkit, which we make available. I'm delighted to talk more with any of you. If there's any last questions, I'm happy to hear them now and try to answer them. If they're specific, if you think they're general enough that they'll help everybody. And again, if you'd like to speak with me about the program, just email me. My email's right here. My personal email is andrewknightlick@yahoo.com. You can always reach me at info@centerforexecutivecoaching.com. And for details about our program, please just visit centerforexecutivecoaching.com. By the way, we always offer financing. So if cash flow, if you're on an entrepreneurial budget, like most of us, we can always spread out payments. All right. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time.